People tend to do the strangest things when they're alone by themselves in a room. Piece in the book called Failure's Not the Opposite of Success. This is really great because we have this zeros and ones, a black and white view of life. Either I've become successful or I'm not. Either I'm a manager at a leadership level or I'm not. Either I'm healthy and super fit or I'm not. And usually life isn't like that. We're all on this sort of journey. At some point, especially if you're not at that place where you want to be, it's important for you to realize that, hey, you're on that journey. So you're still getting there, and enjoy that process of getting there. While you're still working hard, you're still doing all the right things. A lot of what people do boils down to their behaviors. So even if you have a really large goal, a lot of times the reason you would meet or achieve those goals is because you've done the right things, and those right things boil down to specific behaviors which get you closer. If you don't achieve things that you want to, then it's usually because you've not done the things that are going to get you there. The fitness club makes money through that. The reason people don't work out is not because that building doesn't exist or the equipment doesn't exist. It's because they don't show up there regularly. So I think regularity a lot of times trumps intensity, and most of the time when I meet people who've not achieved, gotten the results that they themselves want, it's not like somebody else is asking you to do something. For months, grow beyond a 5 to 6 member team, because when the 7th and 8th leader came into the system, or sometimes got elevated or promoted from the organization.
Welcome back to the Future Proof Leaders Podcast. I'm Justin, and this show is for visionary entrepreneurs running from 100K to 1 million business annual revenue, who wants to cut through distraction and build companies that run without them. So I'm here with Vignesh. He is a positive psychologist, leadership consultant to Fortune 500 companies, TEDx speaker, Forbes Coaches Council member, and author of From Behavior to Well-Being. Vignesh has trained over 30,000 leaders across the globe, is known for helping CXOs and founders achieve world-class performance through authenticity and positive psychology. So we're going to use this book as an anchor. Then we will dig into 3 practical levers you can install and implement in your business immediately. So hi, Vignesh. Great to have you here.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me here. It's good to meet you again at your podcast.
Great to have you here. And we are excited to learn about you, your book, and what you wanted to preach to the leaders that we're going to be showing this episode. So let's talk about your book, From Behavior to Well-Being. So in a very simplistic manner, in one breath, what's the core promise of the book, From Behavior to Well-Being, for founders that is running 5 to 15 person teams? But it could be within just slightly outside that spectrum.
Yeah. So, I'd probably like to backtrack a bit and look at how I started writing this book. When I started writing, a lot of my well-meaning friends sent me for a number of these writing events saying there's an event here, there's an event there, and I started going and attending these events. And I noticed there's a huge bunch of people who either have a book idea or who want to write a book, or who have the name of the book, they know the cover of the book, they know where they want to have the book launch. They have everything in place except the real book. So my story was quite different, because I had started writing for a number of magazines, and I think at some point I'd written a few hundred articles on human behavior and positive psychology and leadership. And I said, look, I have to publish some of this. So I had everything except the book. I had everything except I hadn't published it as a book. So I picked out about 64 articles and clubbed them based on commonality of content. And that's what became the book. So I was sort of forced to think about what you just asked me. What's the one big promise of the book? And that became the title. The book, I decided to call it From Behavior to Well-Being. And the tagline is how your behavior can help you live a good life. So anything that you try to do, usually it's related to behavior change. Most of my clients seek me out or get in touch with me because they're trying to do something which I call positive behavior development. And whether that behavior is better leadership, helping people demonstrate greater executive presence, or being able to influence without authority, and all sorts of things which happen or are required at the leadership level. For somebody who is a leader for a company, 5 to 15 people, or even a larger circle, people have come back after reading the book and told me a number of things that have worked. And one thing which has worked, I think, usually has been, the very practical nature of the book, because that's a big part of the work that I do. I'm not a very theoretical psychologist. A big part of my work is translating the theory and the research papers into actual action and results for clients. People have come and said things that have worked for them. For example, there's one piece in the book called Failure is Not the Opposite of Success, and an idea which I stole from Mariana Huffington. And people have come and said, this is really great because we have this zeros and ones, black and white view of life. Either I've become successful or I'm not. Either I'm a manager at a leadership level or I'm not. Either I'm healthy and super fit or I'm not. And usually life isn't like that. We're all on this sort of journey. And at some point, especially if you're not at that place where you want to be, it's important for you to realize that, hey, you're on that journey. So you're still getting there, and enjoy that process of getting there while you're still working hard, you're still doing all the right things. Like there's another piece in the book, which is called Life is a Pursuit of Excellence. It's an idea that came to me from one of my favorite books called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It's a book about quality. And I wrote this article after the writer Robert Pirsig died a few days after that. And in the book, he talks about quality and the importance of pursuing quality. And I call that excellence in this article. And I think it's important to do whatever you do extremely well. And I think there's some sort of charm, satisfaction, potential to tap into happiness just by doing that. So yeah, I think what leaders and the extended circle of readers of the book would take back a number of these practical tips.
So there's really a lot of use cases in the book, which is very valuable for this episode for our audience. Especially when you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot of ups and downs. And sometimes you even doubt yourself of, am I actually doing the right thing? And I think from your book, it empowers entrepreneurs, visionary entrepreneurs, especially when you're about to hit that, eureka moment, or something that you want to overcome from a roadblock. And those are very critical moments, which you need someone to guide you. You need someone to, wake you up, because sometimes when you're emotionally trapped into that, we call it maybe a deadly cycle, because you're kind of in the emotions of, oh, am I going to make it? Like, you have this fears going on. Having those ideas that you just mentioned about the book gives us a little bit of clarity and hope into, can we go to the right direction? Like before we even started this podcast, we were doing a lot of testing because we don't want to record a podcast which we would miss the sounds, or we want to make sure that everything's there, right? And the beauty of having a guide like you yourself with your book, with the help of your book, and hopefully our audience will also get a lot of value from the book. And just to pick up something that also was very fascinating, because you mentioned about you have a community or an environment where they are preparing all the cover, the title, but they don't have the content, which I think with this day and age, that still exists.
Right.
That still exists. Like we have all but the most important thing in life with whatever we're doing is the content. Is the content that change some people's lives or the world, which is the direction that you did. So I wanted to touch base into much more of, why did you choose this book and why is it important to you to write this book?
See, one of the things was that I had a number of observations about human behavior and what people were doing, and especially the clients who I worked with. So it was important for me to put this down for a number of reasons. And I also realized that a lot of what people do boils down to their behaviors. So even if you have a really large goal, a lot of times the reason you would meet or achieve those goals is because you've done the right things, and those right things boil down to specific behaviors which get you closer. And if you don't achieve the things that you want to, then it's usually because you've not done the things that are going to get you there. So the book really is for somebody who, I mean, I think the ideal audience for the book is someone who's working towards something, has a very clear direction, wants to get there, wants to lose weight, wants to get fit, wants to get a better job, wants to become a better leader, wants to build better relationships in their lives, and are looking for support or some sort of way to be helped through it. I don't think this is a book for someone who's saying that, look, I have a certain lifestyle. I love drinking every day. I smoke 20 cigarettes every day. I don't really believe in working hard. And you know what? Life's just perfect. I love it just the way it is. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's an approach. It's just that this particular book is not for a person like that. This is not a book about converting people and saying that everyone's well-being's got to go through the roof, and it's not that. It's not evangelistic. So it is, of course, for people who have that direction clear, and they're like, this is what I want to do, and I'm still finding it difficult to do it. And other things that I can learn, apply, which actually produce tangible, measurable results. And such a person would find a lot of things in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's not for everyone. And that's how amazing this book is. So, if I'm going to be maybe just to be curious about, like, why do you want to write this type of book for a certain spectrum of the people? Why is it important to you there?
I think it started, another big reason why it started is because of, you could treat this book as an FAQ document. So a lot of people, I would go for these talks, I'd go to conduct a workshop, I'd go to some organization to speak about something. And at the end of it, or during the break or after the workshop, there would be people who asked me certain things. And I thought there was a recurrent theme. And that theme was related to, at a larger level, well-being. That theme was related to psychological well-being. That theme was related to patterns of behavior. That the theme was related to positive behavior development. So I sort of combined things that I'd written at different points of time and put it together in the form of a book. And that was certainly one of the big motivations. Yeah.
Wow. Awesome. Maybe let's just have a glimpse of the book, right? So, as a part of your book, I've got a part where you talked about, you define behavior as both physical and in head. So why does regularity will be more important, or more, it matters more than intensity if you're going to have results for your work?
Yeah. So for a long time in psychology, I think behaviorism was pretty dominant. The work of the psychologist called B.F. Skinner, who finally retired at Harvard, but did a lot of work from around the 1930s to the early 70s. And his whole theory of behaviorism was, that behavior is what psychology should be studying, and everything else is mumbo jumbo. And I do sort of respect that point of view. And in the book, I talk about behavior, or I define behavior as anything that you do, but I do mention that it's not just something that you do physically, like waking up early. It's also what you could do in your head, which is what you're alluding to. And I think cognitive psychology talks about these things, like a lot of processes that go on inside your brain, like attention, memory, language, mental imagery, reasoning, intelligence, problem solving, and all these things matter. So it's not as if behaviorism and cognitive psychology are against each other. In fact, it's the opposite. You do need to understand what's going on through the person's head to make them act in a certain way. You do need to understand what they're dealing with, just cognitively, to be able to produce better results by taking the right actions. So therefore, I do talk about behavior physically in terms of actions that you take, but also what happens inside your head. You could come to office on a Monday morning and you have a lot of emails, and you're saying, oh my God, so many emails, only in your head. And that changes a lot of the way you would react to and write these emails. So I look at both sides of it. The second part of your question about why regularity, a lot of times gym memberships are legendary for this. There are a lot of gyms and fitness centers across the world which nowadays don't have a monthly or a short-term membership. You have to sort of sign up for the whole year, which is fantastic because you're going to drop out, right? And the fitness club makes money through that. So the whole idea is, the reason people don't work out is not because that building doesn't exist or the equipment doesn't exist. It's because they don't show up there regularly. So I think regularity a lot of times trumps intensity. And most of the time when I meet people who've not achieved or gotten the results that they themselves want, it's not like somebody else is asking you to do something. You don't get the results that you want, which you've set for yourself, precisely because you've not been regular enough. So that's really the importance of regularity. In fact, it's also worth mentioning, sometimes you don't get the results you want also because of too much intensity. If you just start doing something and doing it so rigorously, you sort of shock your body and mind into, it's afraid to enter that room the next time because you think that room means hard work, that room means the grind. And do I want to really do this every single day? So slow change, regularity trumps intensity. I recommend to people, don't try to lose 10 kgs in 2 months. Just lose 1 kg a month if you're trying to lose weight. And then in 2 years, you would have lost 24 kgs. More importantly, your lifestyle would have changed. And then if you do that for a couple of years, you disappear.
You will go back to your default, right? If it's intensive, because I see a lot of, thinking about the gym membership that you talked about, I also wanted to share with you, maybe if we talked about like maybe a coaching program, for example, a curriculum, and it's an intensive program versus doing it regularly, like people would really, go into the intensive and okay, this is like 6 weeks intensive.
Right.
And it works for that time, but after they're all gone. Whether they implement it, they do it regularly, and if not, they will disappear. They just chase another shiny object.
Absolutely.
So beautiful analogy. So if we're going to be talking about, I know that you have a lot of stories, and that's the reason why you wrote this book. Can you share like one story where a small behavior shift and it led to a much more of a measurable business outcome, whether it's for you, whether it's for a client, and it could be maybe a margin, maybe a retention, maybe a well-being, any metrics that you could think about?
Yep. So just thinking, maybe this client who I worked with, where the leadership team at the top, which reported to the CEO, had about 5 people, sometimes 6, sometimes 5, and there was a lot of turbulence just at the level below them and for their teams working with each other. This was a technology company, which of course I don't want to name. And a big part of this happened, and they couldn't, for months, grow beyond a 5 to 6 member team, because when the 7th and 8th leader came into the system, or sometimes got elevated or promoted from the organization, it created a lot of trouble, miscommunication. They didn't work together, and so on. So it was difficult for that organization to grow. And finally, what actually worked was I would work with this team once or twice a month, usually twice a month, where I would get this group together, not focusing on any skill development, not focusing on any competency per se, but just getting them to talk to each other. And sometimes conversations happen spontaneously. So we would meet at a resort on the outskirts of Bangalore, and we would sit there, and everyone comes into the room. So we have breakfast, then we sit down, then we start talking about what's happening. And I would pretty much, as a coach, just facilitate those conversations, but not really, teach them anything new. And that really made a lot of difference, because these leaders started talking with each other. They started talking about what's on their mind. They started trusting each other more. They started spending that half day with each other. Then we'd take a coffee break and we'd come back, and then we'd break around lunchtime. The session gets over. And what happened as a result was slowly they added a sixth member who also joined these weekend meetings. And then they added a seventh member, then they added an eighth member. But by this time, the six-member team had gotten really strong, and they sort of inducted every new leader into it, as opposed to seeing a new leader as an outsider who's sort of trying to break into the club, right? And that's something that helped. And of course, eventually, each of these leaders, they moved from 6 to a 12-member team, and each of them had a couple of hundred people over time below them. It started with 20, 25, 50, 100, and so on. So the organization grew. Obviously, profits grew, but it all started with having more dialogue. And that's something which I recommend to a lot of my clients, especially at the leadership level. I think if you have to do just one thing, talk to each other a lot more, because a lot of times conversations at that level are just transactional. If you're the CFO and I'm the CTO, if there's nothing transactional, if I don't have to get anything done with you and through you, why would I talk to you? I mean, that's the attitude which some organizations carry, and I don't know if it's really healthy. But just talking and spending time, and sometimes even talking about things not related to work helps you build a bond which you cannot leave behind at that resort. Because when you come back to office, you're impacted by it. Yeah.
Beautiful example. And I think just to share a little bit of my experience too, I think in trans culture, we call it, we tend to do things not normal when we first meet someone. And I don't know if it's a similar concept as what you have. So let's just say you meet someone, maybe for a coffee or something, and to make it ease, like I'll pay for the drink or something. Just a small gesture to kind of have that. I mean, the coffee would not be expensive, whether if it's a Starbucks or not. It's okay, but it's more of the relationship. So, would you think from your book, from well-being, would it matter a lot in relationships? Would it affect business relationships or personal relationships as well? I'm just curious about in that aspect.
Yeah, I don't think I talk about this explicitly in the book, but there are some theories in psychology which sort of support this, saying that sometimes we do things which don't come to us naturally, but we end up doing it anyway. For example, we tend to change our behavior from time to time, and also from one place to another on the same day or within a matter of a few minutes. Like sometimes you just walking into a room, and because that room has a lot of people, you're going to behave differently. So there are a lot of theories which support that. One of the popular ones is by Bib Latané, and it's called the social impact theory. And he said that there are a couple of things that impact your behavior. One of them is strength. You're likely to change your behavior a lot more in front of somebody or in the presence of somebody who has greater strength. And this doesn't refer to physical strength, but your perceived strength or image of that person. So if you're, CEOs coming to visit your office from headquarters, you're likely to change your behavior much more compared to if somebody at the next cubicle is walking in. You are also likely to change your behavior. The first one is strength. The second thing is immediacy. So if you're talking to someone on the phone, your behavior is likely to change less compared to meeting that person face to face. Like you said, meeting that woman at Starbucks or somewhere is not the same. There's something different about it compared to WhatsApping her till that meeting happens. And when you meet that person, you're likely to change your behavior because the immediacy is so high. She's right there and you are right there too. So you might just pay for the coffee, maybe, even if it's not your usual style. Okay. So there's immediacy. And the third thing is number. I think people tend to do the strangest things when they're alone by themselves in a room. Even having one other person share that room with you reduces the chances of you doing those things. And if there are 10 people, of course, the change from 2 to 10 is not as much as 0 to 1. So you are likely to change your behavior a lot more in the presence of a greater number of people. So which is why it's also easier to talk to one person face to face compared to giving a talk to 300 people on a stage. So because the social impact is so high that it impacts your behavior. So yeah, I mean, I do sort of mention bits and pieces of this in the book.
Exactly, exactly. And of course, it's not only just buying a coffee, it's also even like appreciating someone, maybe their looks or they're smart, even for the first time, right? So that really changes the behavior. It eases some sort of, we have this protective layer where when we meet someone or even at the work or in business. But that
Right.
eases that kind of protective layer during
Yep,
those times.
absolutely.
So thank you for sharing your case study. And I know that if you run a business and you're an entrepreneur, you're the business owner, you're still human, you still have your personal well being. How does this book act as like a bridge between personal well being and business bottom line, in your opinion?
Yeah. So, well, a couple of ways. One of the big ways is that if you're trying to get something done, first you've got to be physically fit, mentally fit. You've got to be there, and you've got to be healthy enough to get everything done. And we experience this off and on when, just say you've got this big project going on. You just can't afford to miss a single day because every minute counts. But something happens and you're down with this major viral, and you're just out of work for 2 weeks. And guess what? Nothing really happens. Life still goes on, you know? And we often discount that phenomenon because that's a great reminder of the fact that while we are running after something and doing everything that we can to keep the ship afloat, keep the project going, keep the client happy, grow the business, whatever, it's important to know that all this works if you work. And for you to work, you've got to have a certain level of physical well-being as well as psychological well-being. You've got to be present. You've got to be healthy and fit enough to be there, and that's when things get done. So I think that's an important piece of the puzzle. And one of the things I encourage people to do is to sort of pursue that idea. And it also matters that you pursue well-being. I mean, I don't go with a standard definition of well-being saying that this is what everyone should do. It depends on what well-being and a good life means to you. And if to you it means being able to make enough money and retire and travel the world, then that's great. But at least you got to be healthy enough to get that done. And for somebody else, it might just be doing the same exact job year after year till they retire in their when they're 60. And that's perfect too. So the whole book revolves around this idea rather than being prescriptive of getting people or supporting them in doing exactly what they want to do.
So, Vinesh, that's great. That's awesome. Let's now operationalize this into a leadership rhythm, the behaviors that compound, and the scoreboard that drives decision. So, let's talk about, or maybe you can walk us through about the 90-day leadership rhythm. And we're going to walk, maybe you could walk us through, like, let's say from a Monday to Friday rhythm in 60 seconds if possible. But if not, we want it to be very concise. And maybe what's the job does each ritual do? Maybe we can talk about like a weekly reset, one-on-ones, decision log, Friday debrief, or it could be like a weekend session that you talked about earlier with your story.
There's, a lot of times when clients reach out to me to train the organization or to develop their leadership, even if it's a large company, eventually it boils down to the people changing or the leaders becoming better leaders by doing certain things. So, as is the microcosm or as is the macrocosm, so is the microcosm. So individual change matters. And just like that, a 90-day rhythm works only if every month, every week, and finally every day, you end up doing the right things. So yeah, maybe 1 week is a good place to start. And it's interesting that you must say, 60 seconds, because that's the way in which the world is going, right? Nobody has time to work out to do something for an extended period of time. They want quick fixes. They want 2-minute abs. They want something that they can do for 20 seconds a day and get a six pack. So anyway, I definitely don't have a solution for that. But here's a leadership rhythm that's worked for a lot of leaders I've coached. And it's something that you can do in a week. And then, it starts with Monday. And Monday is the day, it's the start of the week. So you sort of club it with what I call just start. And just start is about, start doing something that matters. A lot of times we spend time in a preparation, taking stock, making a list. I mean, all those things are great, but the real deal is when you start doing the actual work. So, even when I work with people, I notice that a lot of them don't end up getting what they want because they just haven't started. So just start looks closer to, if you're trying to work out, instead of thinking about it, instead of doing all those things, what would you first do? You'd sort of get dressed, put on your workout clothes, just start. And when you do that, the next thing sort of follows, and the next thing sort of follows. You're not going to put on your workout clothes, wear those shoes, and just sit down on the couch. You're going to move. And the same thing with work. You come into office or you start work and you start working on something solid quickly. And that's what Just Start is about. It gets you moving in the right direction. And there's something magical, at the same time difficult, about starting. And therefore, when you start, everything falls into place. So even people who are trying to write that big book, I tell them to start writing. Even if it's the wrong thing, when you write it out, you have a sense that it's wrong or right, or what it is. A 60-second rhythm for Tuesday would be to just make a list of 3 things. We are often overwhelmed by all the things that we need to get done. But I've noticed this repeatedly. Some of the most successful people, some of the most effective leaders, they're doing fewer things, but they're really doing the things that matter. So if, for example, a day starts and 3 things that matter for you on that day is to talk to this very difficult stakeholder. And secondly, you have to do something about your finances. And so you have to talk to your accountant. And thirdly, there's something going on at work. There's somebody who's about to quit and you have to speak to that person. All these 3 things are important. But they're pretty difficult to do. And they could be awkward, uncomfortable, whatever you classify it as. And these are the precise things that you should be doing instead of checking your email, buying something on Amazon, talking to somebody, chit-chatting, starting something new, going for a meeting. All those things are great, but that's just noise. It's important to get to the 3 things that matter. So the 60-second variant of that, or part of that, is to make a note of those 3 things and just forget about everything else. Focus on those 3 things. Wednesday is a good day I call it the bridging day. So you bridge the gap between the 2 days that went past, Monday and Tuesday, as well as Thursday and Friday, which are yet to come. So you do what you can on Wednesday to make the first 2 days effective, as well as make the next 2 days really productive. So if that means meeting somebody, if that means setting up a meeting, you can decide what you want to do on Wednesday. And you can spend 60 seconds on just thinking about what's going to make the past 2 days and the next 2 days effective. I think Thursday is a great day to visualize. If you have 60 seconds on Thursday, sit down and think about the ideal outcomes of one big thing that you're working on. So pick the biggest thing that you're working on. Think about what it would look like and just imagine that coming true. And just do that for 60 seconds. A lot of people like to visualize on Mondays, but usually the things that you're working on are not some things that start and get over on the same week. Sometimes they pour over to another week, to another month, and so on. So Thursday is a good day for that. And Friday is a day that I call, tying up loose ends. So look at what's left unfinished on Friday, and you can finish those things. You can also prevent, and I talk about this in my book. It's called the gradual slip effect, where we rarely move from being, say, fit to unhealthy. We rarely move from being great leaders to lousy leaders. It's a gradual transition. And Friday is a good day to look at where you've slipped and, fix those things where you have slipped, and tie up loose ends, things that you started but you haven't taken to completion. promises that you made, but you didn't really live up to them, emails that you said you're going to send, but you didn't end up sending. I think Friday is a good day to do that. I have serious doubts about whether it can be done in 60 seconds, but it can at least be done by by Friday afternoon. So, and I think I really don't suggest people to do anything on Saturday or Sunday other than exactly what they want to do. I think it's important. It matters to do nothing on the weekends because it just makes the rest of your week effective.
That's a great way to visualize from Monday to Friday. And as you said, there's nothing, it's best not to do anything the weekend. So maybe my question about like Monday could be just start, Tuesday would be three things, Wednesday would be a little bit much more of how do you make it effective from 2 days before and 2 days after. And Thursdays is, if I get it correct,
Visualization.
visualization, and maybe not 60 seconds. And five is the cleaning up the deliverables, the pending you're putting on the side, like the emails that you wanted to reply, but oh, okay. Like, so my question is, what if, can it be interchanged, or is this what you think is the most effective flow?
Well, I've found, anything can be interchanged, because this is not the silver bullet. So you can change it, try it, tweak it, play with it. But this sequence has repeatedly produced results for the people I've worked with. Okay, because Monday is a day when they, if you're going to start on Wednesday, the real thing, you've already wasted 2 days. So it just makes sense to start on Monday. Tuesday is a great date because you've already started and you know what it involves. So there are 3 things that you can get done that matter. Wednesdays, you're looking at what went past. It's a midweek reflection day. Thursday, you're visualizing, you're seeing what things look like. And sometimes when you visualize this Thursday, you're going to see the benefits next week or the week after that. And we are all human. So at the end of the week, we've still not finished what we planned. And it's good to acknowledge that and allow yourself time on the last day of the week to do that.
And I think most of the entrepreneurs are very overworked and they get burned out because even on the weekends, they would still go and, go over what needs to be done. So just curious from your point of view, like, because just now you said that you don't do anything on the weekend. And for entrepreneurs, that might be a little bit difficult, especially when you're, pursuing something big. So what's your opinion about that? Do we leave it like nothing, or do we let ourselves to go into what we need to finish?
Actually depends on your mindset because, as I moved out of, I have an undergrad degree in mechanical engineering and I worked very briefly as an engineer, the first year after graduation, maybe. And then when I moved into psychology, into training and coaching and leadership consulting, the lines that separate my personal and my work life became absolutely blurred. So just look at us. We're recording this on a Saturday, That's a contradiction,
Yeah.
right, to what I just said. But the important thing is that I don't see this as work. I don't feel like, oh my God, I have to meet Justin and then do this podcast. Like, so if you have stuff like that in your life, and if you've been blessed, or sometimes, if you work towards finding what really works for you in terms of a career, in terms of a job, that's brilliant. And parts of it might spill into the weekend. But if you work from Monday to Saturday, Monday to Friday, and then you're done with work and you want to get away from it, I think it's a smart idea to actually do that. So I think if you're somebody who's feeling stressed by the end of the week, then it's worth taking Saturday and Sunday off. But if you're somebody who, if you're a jazz musician and you've been playing a couple of shows and a lot of your big shows are on weekends, that's just perfect. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, I get what you mean. But for me, me personally, I don't rest on the weekends because when I rest, I feel like I'm thinking about work. And if I don't do anything, I feel like I'm uneasy. I'm uneasy. So I would rather just get my hands dirty. But sometimes, as what you said, I think having that reset button. But for me, it may not happen every week, but it could happen maybe once a month, just to have that kind of refresh. Like even the
Mhm.
computers would also need a restart sometimes, right?
That is true. That is true.
Yes. So okay, so let's go in a little bit much more of, if we talk about, so do you believe in much more of a ritual kind of thing to just do it regularly? As what you said, regularity is better than intensity, right? But let's say if it's not like a routine or a ritual that you're doing, but you're still kind of, doing those few things that is similar, but it's not exactly the specific activity. So I'll give you an example. So if you're talking about, let's say you're working on your marketing, and when you're working on your marketing, it's not exactly like just doing the ads, or you're building something about maybe your lead magnet, or your content, right? But it's not specifically to that activity. What's Would that still fall into that regularity, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, there is. I mean, there are some things that you might want to do regularly. I think the challenge, as you mentioned earlier, for a lot of people is being able to carve out time for that. And I think the it's an interesting debate. Is it easier to do something or to not do something? And a lot of times, people find it slightly easier to not do something unless it's, I don't know, you know, cocaine or alcohol or some other addiction that you. So it's for the most part, when it comes to personal effectiveness, performance, it's a lot easier to sit around without doing something than to do it. And I think it's an interesting idea to sort of capitalize on. So start with cutting off the things that you are doing which are sucking up your time, which you can stop doing. Whether it could be different things for different people. If you think watching Netflix is a waste of your time, being on social media is a waste of your time, reading the news, watching the news is a waste of your time, those are great things to cut. And sometimes we just surprise ourselves by the amount of time that we spend doing these things. So that immediately frees up a lot of time for you. So in some ways, you're talking about rituals. You're getting more out of your life by breaking some rituals. Sometimes it's just a dumb ritual for you to come back from work, eat something, sit in front of the television, and it's just become something you do every single day, and you're really dedicated and committed to it. It's part of your religion. So it makes sense to break something like that, which isn't helping you. And the things that you're doing really well, which are worthwhile, because some people say watching TV for 30 minutes is brilliant. It just clears up my mind. It releases stress, and it does all sorts of amazing things for me. Though a lot of the research in psychology doesn't show that. People, when they're asked, how do you feel when you're watching TV or watching a movie? It's not like they're feeling amazing, they're feeling great, they're feeling ecstatic. They're sort of feeling numb. And that's what most responses say. So I think if you want to cut out some of those things where you're just mindlessly doing it, and the things that you don't cut are the things that are working well for you. There must be something that you're doing right, which you're doing well, which you're doing regularly, whether it's meditation, whether it's spending time by yourself, whether it's reading a book. I think that's worth doing. And if you do have that extra time, and not 60 seconds, but if you have something like 30 minutes every day, I would recommend to a lot of people, and this has worked so well for people who have coached and leaders I've worked with, is to just spend that 30 seconds writing, and that clears up your mind, makes you feel better. And it really doesn't matter what you're writing about. In fact, interestingly enough, it doesn't even matter if you're writing something original or even copying something down from somewhere. I mean, it's going to be pretty silly to copy something down from somewhere, but even that, the act of writing physically makes a lot of difference. So I think writing for 30 minutes a day about anything, it could be a book chapter, it could be just your experience of the day, it could be something that's going on through your mind, it could be just anything. There's a book by James Penbaker which is called The Secret Life of Pronouns, because his research was about what our use of pronouns says about us. But he realized while he was collecting information and getting people to write, for that book, that just writing every day made people feel better mentally, psychologically, have lesser anxiety, more feel good emotions and so on.
I fully agree with that because I do that too every day as a journal. Sometimes I have this small non-mobile phone timer so that am I really writing into just 30 minutes or 15 minutes but without distraction. So I have to turn off like all the screens, like the phone has to be like away and the window has to be closed, like all of those distractions. I get distracted easily. And I found that when you're writing, you get ideas from your writing and it gets out in the words. But as you said, yes, it's healthy, but also just to tap on that too, in my experience, is really to know about you yourself and like there's surprises when you write. So I'm not doing the wrong thing. So thank you for that confirmation. So I know you talked about like a little bit of like what things to cut, what are the tasks or activities that doesn't really help us or make us more productive. Do you have maybe like warning signals or signs that oh maybe this is not helping me? And as we know, like as our conversation so far, it's all about like the person, right? If the person thinks that this is helping me, then so do you have kind of like I wouldn't maybe if it could be a framework, it could be something that you think that oh I will eliminate this. This is not helping me. What's your experience like? Where would you go to find those?
You have to be realistic. Getting into a new rhythm, starting a new ritual, it does take time. It's not something that comes naturally to a lot of us. And if you've started off on trying to build a rhythm of some sort, I think it's a good idea to look for what I call slips and skips. So skips are pretty easy. Like you started on this new rhythm of writing regularly, or like, nowadays it's quite interesting. From the past, maybe, I don't know, close to 10 years, journaling has picked up a lot of steam. But, it's not a new thing. Earlier, it was just called writing. And now, there are structured journals to write what you're grateful for, to write different things. So if you've started on something like that and you're trying to do it every day or play a musical instrument or just do a course and just listen to 1 hour of the recording or whatever, look for skips. If you're skipping a day, then that's certainly something for you to at least notice. And the other things are slips, where you're not really skipping, but you're doing it really incompletely. You're not doing a great job at it. You're you're walking, but you take a shorter route. You're working out, but you're not doing each rep perfectly. You're writing, but you're just checking your phone half the time, and then you're sitting down to write but doing everything else. So it's important to notice that, because there is something about doing it with quality, doing it focusing on excellence, as opposed to just doing it like the way you feel like. So the first step is to notice that. And if you notice this happening, just noticing it helps you not repeat it. And at least if you want to fix it, you know what to fix. The other thing I'd recommend to people is also to have, instead of setting yourself this great target of 10,000 steps every single day, and believe me, you will slip and you will skip. So instead of that, set a target that's realistic. And I tell people that, if you're trying to change something, set yourself 2,000 steps thrice a week. And then usually the reaction is, oh, 2,000 steps, I do that anyway. Well, great. Let's see if you can keep that up for a month. And then once you keep that up for a month, you feel good. And then you can move that to 3,000 steps thrice a week. And you keep that up for a month, and you can move that to 4,000. It's important at the end of the week to feel successful and not feel like a failure. And a lot of people out there, they set their own targets for themselves, and they set themselves up to feel like failures at the end of the week. And that's not a good thing, because the week gets over and you've not even stuck to your own promises. The next week gets over and the same thing repeats. It interestingly does strike a lot of people to lower the targets and fix something easier. The final thing I would suggest is to try to do something for 7 days a week, even if that's just reading one page of a book. Try to do it for 7 days a week, because you get to exercise the regularity muscle. We spoke about how, regularity beats intensity. You get to exercise the regularity muscle. You get to know what it feels like. Even just give yourself an easier target, like drinking a cup of green tea for 7 days a week. Stick with it and let it be a new thing. Like if you brush your teeth every day, don't pick that. And I hope people brush their teeth every day. But so pick something that's new, that's easy, that's so easy that you will just not slip. Okay. And do it for 7 days and see how it goes. Do it for the next 7 days. Don't try to make that 1 cup of green tea, 2 cups. Just do it for 7 days. That gets you to practice regularity and exercise the regularity muscle. I think that's a brilliant thing to follow.
Yes, it's hilarious. So yeah, just start with a very minimal step and just make it consistent and just build up that muscle. And from there you can build the momentum, right? So now we talked about like behavior stack because like for example, we do have these behaviors that we have already kind of realized, and maybe we can talk about like much more about keystones to compounding results. So how do you map A work versus C work and pick 2 to 3 keystone behaviors for sales, delivery, leadership, and maybe also share with us like what is A work and what is C work?
So this idea, I mean, I first came across it in Robert Kiyosaki books. So where he talks about C work as being more creative, innovative, blue sky, new ideas. So this is important, and there are some areas where that matters. And A work is more analytical, logical, factual, data driven, rule following, rule abiding, and that sort of work. And both these are important. And you must have noticed this. There are a lot of people who have amazing ideas. They have amazing business ideas. They have startup ideas. They have ideas to change the way the company they work in functions and so on. And that's an expression of C work. And the A work is actually putting that to work. So there's a fraction of people, I'm sure you have friends or people you've met who say, a new business comes out and starts becoming successful. And they say, oh, I had this idea in 2015. I had this idea in 2010,
A lot.
but you didn't move you didn't do anything about it. And they did. So they did a lot of the A work, which requires discipline, showing up every day, doing it deliberately and so on. So that's just a fundamental distinction between A work and C work. I think C work is far more useful for bigger picture, overall objectives, strategy. Execution of that strategy requires A work, which is actually doing it, implementing it, enforcing it, and making sure it sticks. So some of the keystones, and you spoke about stacking. I think some things that work in this domain is to, first of all, make it easier for the good stuff. So look at all the great habits that you have, which you've followed, which have become rituals. It's just right there. The pack of cigarettes is always in your pocket, or it's lying there. It's easy for you to pick it up and start smoking. The book is not in your pocket, so you might not read it. Okay? So make it easy for the good things that you want to stick, and make it difficult for the things that you're trying to stop doing. Like there was this famous therapist called Milton Erickson, and a lot of his therapeutic ideas are based on that, where he would say, when someone contacts him or gets in touch and says, I'm trying to quit smoking. So he would tell them, well, you don't have to quit, you can smoke. But all you have to do is keep your cigarettes on the top shelf of the loft, and you can smoke only 1 cigarette at a time. You can take out only 1 cigarette at a time, and you have to smoke it outside your house in the parking lot. I'm just sort of making this scenario up, but Milton Erickson's therapy was like that. So this person's under no pressure to stop smoking. He goes to the therapist, and the therapist says, you don't have to stop. You can continue smoking as much as you want, but just follow this rule. Now, every time he goes there, picks up the cigarette, goes to the park, it just becomes so complicated to do. Like I have a friend who went to B school, and he actually quit smoking like that because he was in Philadelphia and it was extremely cold. And, it's a rigorous business program. And he had to go to this place, I think, outside the campus to smoke. So each time he felt like smoking, he's got to put on his warm clothes, come down, walk all the way there, smoke the cigarette, come back. It just becomes so difficult, you eventually quit. And that's the sort of thing that you should do with the behaviors that you're trying to stop, and make it easy for the behaviors that you're trying to continue or start. And I think there's something else that I want to say about stacking. Well, the whole idea of stacking is about, if
And
you're
also,
already doing something, club it with something else that you want to start. So, for example, if you wake up every morning and you do your bed, or you make your bed and then brush your teeth, that's already a set pattern or a set ritual. And if you're trying to start a new practice like meditation, just do your bed, brush your teeth, and then meditate. And that's gets stacked together. So by the time you start your day, you've already finished your meditation, and it's sort of out of the way. You can also do, a lot of people don't talk about it. It's what I call interrupting, where if your idea is to first brush your teeth and then come back and do your bed, and you just can't start your day with that horrible bed, with the sheets and the pillow all over the place. So what you do is you interrupt your pattern and you brush your teeth, and then do what you're trying to do, like your meditation, or you're trying to write every day, or you work out. So you brush your teeth and then you work out, and you have to sort of do your bed. Otherwise, you're not going to be at peace. And you're more likely to work out or write or meditate if you sort of put them in between two rituals that you have every night or every morning. Yeah.
so it's like doing something different out from your usual ritual to kind of break the pattern, but also being consistent. Because if you're like, you feel like everything's so repetitive, it feels like you also wanted to quit because it's like so boring. So having that interruption would keep you going too. So would you recommend doing that most of the time, or just to kind of like, it's like a pattern interrupt? Okay, once in a while I'll do this something different, and then I'll go back to the old stack of behaviors.
You can totally do it most of the time. In fact, there was somebody who I was working with, and I would tell him, just try this visualization. It usually works. And especially for him, he was usually trying to think of the wrong things and think about how everything could go wrong and how everything could get messed up and so on. But unfortunately, morning, when he just got up, which is a good time to do a visualization, he either got up late or something happened when he tried doing it in bed. Then his day started. At night, he would try doing it, but he would fall asleep. And by the time he opened his eyes, it was already morning. So we did this thing of, he would get ready for work. He would have his work clothes on, but not put his shoes yet. Okay? So he would sit down and visualize for 5 minutes and then put his shoes on, because there's no way he's leaving home without his shoes. So that's made it part of his getting ready process. You get ready, you visualize, you put your shoes on, and then you head to work. And after a while, it's just part of that circuit. In fact, he later missed visualization on the weekends because he wasn't really getting ready to go anywhere. But that's good enough, because his target was to do it at least 5 times a week.
Yeah, and as long as the job is done, you get it going. So if we're going to probably, let's zoom in a little bit much more of, let's say we talk about sales or marketing or leadership for this 2 to 3 keystone behaviors, how would we connect it and apply it to these areas?
So if I'm looking at sales, marketing, leadership, or delivery and leadership, one thing which I think has come up repeatedly in my work, which probably impacts all these areas positively, is networking. And if you're trying to get better at that, so you might exercise see work by just thinking of what are the best opportunities for you to network. Are you really meeting the right people? Where would you meet them? A lot of big picture thinking. And once you've done that, if you know that these are the meetings I need to go for, then you have to start doing A work. You got to fix a slot, block your calendar, just show up there repeatedly, meet those people. And maybe in your conversation, you can shift to C work, because talking creatively, talking about different things instead of, you can't have a like some call center executives they have a script. You can't have a script when you're talking to strangers. So it's a combination of both of these. So maybe networking is a good space where you do it regularly and you get better at it. Also, there's something which I recommend to a lot of people: sales, leadership, delivery. None of these fields are devoid of communication, and just having better, clearer conversations. It's a good idea to practice this all the time, because if you say, I'm going to have a clear conversation when I meet my manager, I'm going to have a clear conversation when I meet my client, it's hardly an on-off switch which you can just turn on when you feel like. So the idea is to practice it all the time. So when you go to the mall, when you go to the grocery store, speak to the person there and have clear and interesting conversation. When you go out with your friends on the weekend, have clear and interesting conversation. When you meet strangers at a party, have clear and interesting conversation. And then you're going to carry it with you when you need it the most, into your leadership, into your selling style, into your delivery style if you're an operations person working with a delivery team.
So it's very holistic. It's effective across the board. Like, even if you're not up to that point yet, like you're preparing for something, and sometimes, as you said, like you're preparing for a sales call or client call, but if you keep on doing it, it just naturally snaps it snaps in when the right time comes. And as you mentioned, like, you can talk to strangers, and that's most of the people will have a resistance to that too. So in networking, that is something you need to overcome. If not, like, how could you network, right, with strangers?
Correct. And I'm just reminded as you're saying this that I spoke to you about this idea of quality and doing something really well. So, nothing stops you from practicing doing something well when you're cooking. Nothing stops you from practicing doing something well when you're just getting dressed, when you're organizing your wardrobe, when you're setting up your house for guests to come in on the weekends if you've invited your friends. Everything is an opportunity to practice excellence, and then you can carry it more easily to your work. But if you do everything in a snipshoddy, incomplete, low quality way, to suddenly put that button on just with your operations team or your delivery team or your sales team or your leadership team, just becomes a little more difficult.
Awesome. If we're going to talk about like specific 7-day first win, like maybe is a 10 to 15 person team will feel immediately, how would that pan out?
Well, we've spoken a lot about what people could do and the different things that they could do. But if you've been doing something for 7 days, just say somebody who's leading a 10-person team, one of the things that or even if you're part of that 10-person team, one of the things that you'll start seeing as results is that, you start feeling different. And I think it's important to tap into your feelings. Check how you're feeling at the end of those 10 days or even before that. If you start feeling good, if you start feeling positive, if you start feeling those good emotions or good vibes, that's a good signal or indicator that things are going well for you. A lot of times when we've not done things well enough, we can actually feel it. Sometimes we decide not to acknowledge it or we are not even thinking of it, but a lot of times you can feel it. So just checking in on the way you're feeling is an important step. The other thing is, once you check in to see how you're feeling, for example, a lot of times when people get comfortable with what they're doing, or if they're doing the right thing, if they're becoming on the journey of becoming good leaders, they feel comfortable with their work. They feel comfortable with managing their teams. They feel comfortable with getting things done. That feeling comfortable is an important part. Even the opposite is true. Sometimes if you're not doing things well enough, or if you're not prepared for a meeting, you're feeling uncomfortable. Okay? Or if you have a horrible relationship with your boss, and your boss is in office on that day, you're feeling uncomfortable, even without talking to the person, right? And the third thing is to also check in if you're able to be yourself. For a lot of people, this is a big energy drainer, whether, irrespective of the field that you're in. Even for leaders, if you cannot be yourself at work, in your office, in your cubicle, and you feel like you have to put on a certain, persona, certain style of being, I want to actually sit like this, But because I'm at office, I have to sit straight and I have to look good. This could really drain your energy. So if you're comfortable just being more of yourself in the way you talk, in the way you sit, in the way you interact with others, I think that's a good indicator that you're probably doing the right things, probably working for the right company, probably in the right field of work, and so many other things. And so this feeling of being authentic is quite fundamental to many other things that you might do, including great leadership.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense. And I think there's a nuance here. So I'm curious to know, like, what's the difference between a keystone behavior versus like a nice to have habit? And how do you spot when one is missing?
See, I would look at it like this, and this is probably a minority view, but there's, first of all, behaviors. I don't think there is such a thing as good and bad behavior because it depends on what you want to do. So, for example, hard work. Now, behaviors are usually morality free. So, you have terrorist groups working extremely hard, you have politicians working extremely hard, you have religious groups working extremely hard. So it depends on what you're going to do with it. So that element becomes clearer and could change from person to person. So you have to be really clear about where you're heading and what you want out of your life, out of your work, or what's the direction that you want to take. And once you've taken that direction, it's a good idea for you to focus on whether you're doing the things that you promised yourself to do. So I think if I was to reduce it to one thing, it would be consistency, it would be alignment. So you doing something because somebody else wants you to, because your organization wants you to, because the board of directors wants you to, is not as effective, or it's not the best indicator of the right behavior, as opposed to you doing the things that you stand for. And I think for that, you have to think about what really you stand for and see if you're getting to do more of that every day.
Yes. And that's a very much more of a very clear separator. Because if you were to think about it, like everybody has different stance, different representation, different goals, different aspirations. So having that would have like really clear of which one to discard, which one to continue, and what works for them or what works for us. So let's go now into on the scoreboard, right? Where we're talking about well-being to performance scoreboard and measure what really matters. So let's go down into the which 5 metrics best predict profit and sanity before they show up in the P&L, which is profit and loss.
So there's a lot of research which supports the fact that, especially in positive psychology, positive emotions and optimism are great indicators of success, not just in the short term, also in the long term. Okay, not just at work, but also outside of work, and so on. But I'm more interested to share my observations on this. So one good indicator is to see how optimistic, see how happy you are. And if you're spending the whole day feeling good, feeling happier at work, with your job, with the way you're working, I think that's a good predictor of outcome immediately as well as in the long term. And if you were to measure something and put it in the form of a dashboard, there's a model in positive psychology called PERMA, PERMA. And I think it's a pretty powerful model, though it's a pretty old model. I mean, old in the sense that, the whole field of positive psychology just started in the late 90s. So P stands for positive emotions. So the more positive emotions you experience or your team experiences, the better it is for that person or that team. If you spend most of your day feeling lousy, that's not a good life. If you spend most of your time at office feeling miserable, that's not a good job for you, and so on. So that's a good metric to just rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being pathetic and 10 being awesome. And if most days you're feeling an 8, 9, or 10, at least for most parts of the day, and this is not to say if something bad happens that you have to sort of still purposely force yourself to feel good. You could feel the way you feel. But even without anything happening, just being in office is making you feel bad, then you have to really think about that. So P stands for positive emotions. E stands for engagement. Are there times when time stands still, when you're one with the work that you're doing? Sometimes I'm working on an article and I think it's just 30 minutes, but an hour and a half has just passed. And those are those times of being in flow. So the Hungarian psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi speaks about flow. He's got a book called Flow, and it's about this feeling where when your highest strengths match the demands of the job that you're doing, you're more likely to get into the state of flow. So all these people who live a good life, they have several things in their life where they can experience flow. If you have nothing where you experience that feeling of the state of flow, that's something for you to think about, right? So PE, that's positive emotions. E stands for engagement. R stands for relationships. Do you have great relationships or do you have horrible relationships? So the quality of your life is likely to be the quality of your relationships. If you have poor relationships with everybody, including your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, that's something for you to think about. And a good starting point is to build a great relationship with at least one or two people who you can count on. There is this sense that your net worth is directly proportional to your network. But sometimes the people who actually show up for you are not those 1,000 people you know. It's those one or two people who really matter. So having good relationships is the other element of that dashboard. M stands for meaning, nowadays also called mattering. How much do you think you matter in the organization? How much do you think you matter in the team? Do you think your life is meaningful? If you disappeared tomorrow from the planet, and if you think nothing would change, that's a pretty meaningless life. So are there things that you can contribute towards? Are there people whose lives you impact positively? I think keeping those ideas alive and doing things towards that increases the amount of meaning you have. And that's PRM. A stands for accomplishment. It doesn't matter if you're a founder, director, board member, or a monk. Everyone's trying to achieve something. Even the monk sitting on the mountaintop, the guru sitting in the Himalayas is trying to achieve something that they think worthwhile. And this is also absolutely in alignment with what I mentioned in the book. It's not a prescriptive book in the sense of saying, you do that. It's a book that says you do what you think is right for you. And when you do something which you think is right for you, you're trying to accomplish that. So there's no escaping accomplishment. And the more you hit those spots, if you end the day feeling you accomplished something, that's a better day compared to a day when you feel you've accomplished nothing. Even if you want to spend a day saying, on Saturday, I want to do nothing. At the end of the day, if you did nothing, you're going to feel a sense of accomplishment because you met your own targets. So that's a good dashboard, Justin, for people to follow.
I love that dashboard. It's very simple. Positive, emotion, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment. The A is really where we want to strive for. And as
That's
we
true.
just said, right?
E stands for engagement.
Oh, engagement.
And yeah.
Engagement. So engagement and the relationship that you mentioned was really not all will realize it. As you said, the network is your network, which is we fall into the trap. Oh, people care about us, but at the end of the day, it's only 1 to 2 people, and that is something that is worth spending our life to find that person, right? So, if we don't wanted to really go deep into so much details and so much tactics and very technical, and we just wanted to talk about like how do you track founder capacity? Like we talk about a work percentage, we talk about context switches per day, and act within 24 hours.
Yep. It's quite interesting. My best judgment or assessment of this comes from the founders I've met and worked with. I think a big part of this comes from what I call founder alignment. So are you in a business or are you a founder who's doing something that you align with? And I don't mean just the nature of that business, but even the way that business runs. If you don't have that alignment, you're likely to be stuck you might as well be in any job, including a job that you hate. So looking at what you stand for, just as an example, I was working with somebody, 3 of his top values are adventure, a sense of adventure. Another big value is discipline in getting things done. And the third value is doing the right thing. And even when nobody's watching, doing the right thing. Now, if you're the founder of a business and if your business allows you to do this, that's fantastic. So I think founder alignment is one good indicator. The other thing is, as any founder would agree, being ready to step away from your passions. A lot of times businesses are built on passions. I know this wonderful lady who I was coaching, and great leader. She started off this business which she was really passionate about. And she quit her full-time job saying, I'm done with this. And her business was completely unrelated to that. But she didn't realize that as a founder, you might end up spending a lot of your time away from your passions. Sometimes you're negotiating real estate prices with somebody. Sometimes you're working with the lawyer. Sometimes you're working with your chartered accountant. Sometimes you're just going to a conference to meet some people, and none of this is related to your passion. So sometimes what you started off and what drove you are not the things that you end up doing on a day-to-day basis. So the second indicator of founder capacity is probably being able to step away from your passions when it's required, and at least till you get a team. Which if you're a fashion designer, and if what you really love is to design clothes, and if you start your own design firm, you might have to spend a lot of time doing other things, including marketing yourself, including meeting clients, including traveling. And once you set that up, maybe you can spend time doing the actual design. The third thing is, a lot of founders are so busy, they don't have time to think. I think some of the best founders who I've met, they have time to do uninterrupted thinking. And this immediately puts things in perspective. You can't afford to be a founder who gets your great ideas only when they take that 1 month vacation in December. Spending time every week, just thinking, reflecting on what you're doing, are you doing the right things, and so on. It's also, teams that I work with who report to the founder or, working with the founder, very often you get carried away by data, facts, numbers, evidence, which is good, which is useful, which is important. But it's also a good idea for founders to tap into their feelings. Sometimes there's nothing about a business, according to the data, which is right, but it just feels right. And while this is not scientific, it's a good idea for you to just explore that a bit and see why it felt right, and maybe you'll surprise yourself. And yeah, I think the last thing which I probably have to say, and I'm sure you've noticed this, there are a lot of businesses and a lot of founders who are in the game to just start something, scale, and sell out, and then retire on a beach. So I think it's a good idea to be in the game for the long haul, because that's a different mindset. To have that infinite game mindset, which helps people build something which is robust, as opposed to building something which is just half-baked, but it just looks like a good cake or a good pastry which you can sell quickly. And I think that sort of a mindset often backfires.
So that's an interesting topic that you just shared. If you have that mindset, as you said, like maybe you have a robust solution, you're gonna sell out when the time comes. And I think most of the entrepreneurs, also including my experience too, when you sell your business, you tend to go back. It's like you're craving for that pursuit again, because it's like it's not at the end. So how do you, in your opinion, would going exit and building a business that is much more having this end in mind to sell is the right way to go? Or would you have like a very long term business, like your whole lifetime kind of business? Or what's your opinion on those?
See, I think it's definitely different strokes for different folks, and people have to do what's right for them. Though I can say this, that if you're somebody who's planning to start a business and run it, quit your job and do it, I recommend to a lot of such people who get in touch with me to not quit their jobs yet and to try doing it on evenings and weekends. That's a really good test of your interest in the business, your motivation to actually do it. For example, even if you're trying to become a singer, okay, completely different from working as a leader in a large organization. Try singing, going for singing classes on evenings, and try starting a channel where you're putting up your music. Try singing somewhere in some club, some, Sunday morning brunch in some hotel on the weekends. If you can't do this, if you feel like, oh my God, I have to go on the weekend and sing, you can take a bet that when you quit your full-time job, it would have been a disaster. So my suggestion is, before starting something, to try it out on evenings and weekends. And if you do it so well that every weekend you're booked because you have to go somewhere and sing, and if you're making at least half of what you made in that full-time job, that's a good time to quit. But if you're quitting and saying, oh, I'm going to become a singer, and there's a real danger of you sort of test driving the car after you bought it, and maybe it's the wrong car for you. Okay, so it's good to try it out before
Test the waters.
before buying it. The other thing is also to respect the calendar and to respect time. So a lot of these things which need to be built, it requires an investment of time, energy, and it's quite difficult to do multiple things at the same time. And I remember there was a time many years ago where I had an art website and I was learning a foreign language. I was playing the guitar. I would do other things. I was working out. I was reading psychology. I was also teaching and consulting. It's just so many things. And sometimes it's worth throwing out all the clutter and focusing on just one thing or two things, which gives you that uninterrupted flow of pure energy, which will actually help you explore it completely and take it somewhere.
So if we apply that in all aspects, including business, like just be by focus, test the waters, make sure that you're up to the game in the long haul. It's not just an overnight thing, an overnight success. Like, oh, I get a win. Okay, I'm gonna quit whatever I'm doing, and then I'm gonna go for full ahead. So, all right. Well, that wraps up most of the topics that we had. And for the audience, let us know if you like this episode. Give us a like. Give me some comments. Whatever the takeaways you have, the topics that gives value to you, and also share this to any entrepreneurs, visionary entrepreneurs who needs it as well. And of course, Vignesh, we're going to talk about, just to round things up, and this is like a quick fire round. What we're going to do is I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and these 5 questions, we just need a one-word answer or a phrase. Are you up for it?
Absolutely.
All right. So this is much of a surprise. And so leadership is what to you?
Authenticity, being yourself. Yeah. And I think the best leaders are, people who can be themselves as opposed to trying to be somebody else.
True. And well-being begins with what?
Feeling good, no matter how good your well-being is. If you're not feeling it, then that's not well-being. So I think feeling good matters.
Exactly. Truly agree. And keystone behavior for founders would be
inspiration, because if you're not inspired by something, you are likely to not move, not act, not do any of the others. It all starts with an idea which inspires you, and then you're subject to whether it works for you, whether you're disciplined, whether you're doing A work, C work, whatever. But I think it starts with inspiration.
What's most overrated growth tactic?
I think shortcuts are the most overrated growth tactics. People trying to do things in half the time, quick fixes.
Quarter of the time, 60 seconds.
Yeah, quarter of the time. Reading a 5-minute version of a 1,000-page book and thinking you know everything about it.
Exactly. Very true. And last but not the least, a non-negotiable weekly ritual.
I think spending time by yourself, either meditating, writing, looking out of a window, or even getting bored. It's so important to get bored. There was a research which was done where people had an option of getting bored or giving themselves a mild shock by pressing a button, and there was nothing else to do in the room. You'd be surprised by the number of people who chose the shock over boredom. It's important to spend time by yourself. That's my one phrase, which is a non-negotiable every week.
Yes, that's awesome. That's really profound. A lot of people spend a lot of time somewhere else. So having that time alone is really powerful. So, all right, Vinesh, thank you. This has been powerful for everyone listening. Think about one keystone behavior, one ritual, or one metric you can implement this week. You'll feel the clarity and the momentum immediately by just implementing that one thing. So we'll drop the links with Vinesh books and the website in the show notes. So until then, until next time, keep future proofing your leadership. And I'll see you on my next episode.